Very glad you could join us today on the program. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, and the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry disagrees with Governor Yari of the least viable state and lowest IGR, Governor Yari, on the looming recession predicted. Joining me is Najib Bello, a political analyst, and of course, Martins Lumba, a political analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Good evening.
Another conversation is before us. He is telling newly elected governors to prepare for recession come 2020. But now MAN and LCCI, they're questioning the basis on which he is making those predictions. LCCI, for instance, says he's not an economist. MAN is wondering why he's coming up, where he's coming up with those figures. What are your thoughts? Let me start with you.
I think the basis for his statement is from the president. Some of us don't remember that December 14th, President Buhari had a meeting with some of the outgoing governors and some of the incoming contestants, APC contestants, and he told them that they have to tighten their belts because things are about to get harder. He made that statement, and Governor Yari made the pronouncement too. When he came out of that meeting, with the closed-door meeting with the president, he said this was what the president said.
But this is not the first time we're hearing that things are going to be hard. Things are going to be hard.
So he's just repeating it to the new guys coming in. Now that they've won, he's just making it clear to them that this is what we've seen. You know, this is what the president has said. And of course, the president didn't just say it on his own.
But the deadline he's given, 2020, 2021, how is he coming?
A possibility of a recession coming earlier because there are so many factors. Look at insecurity, for instance. How can Nigeria be productive when you can't even travel easily from Kaduna to Abuja? Farmers can't farm anymore. Benue, a lot of farmlands are just barren because people are getting killed. So what exactly how are we going to sustain the economy? People are talking about crude oil and other things, but we don't determine these things. We can't determine the price of crude oil. So if anything happens, even without crude, if we had decent prices like 72 or so we're having today, with this insecurity in Nigeria and lack of direction of the economy, we are going nowhere.
We certainly will come to the issue of fuel prices, on oil prices in a bit, but I want to also get your thought on this, Martins.
The way I see it, Governor Yari, of course, not an economist, but in practical terms, if you look at how things are playing out in Nigeria, within the economy, you know that there's a lot of volatility. It is clear that a number of people lack all of the basic things that they need to support, their daily living. Cost of living has really gone up, and it will certainly go higher. Again, the purchasing power is dwindling at a very rapid rate. So to that extent, people are going to suffer more. They're going to face a lot more hardship. But be that as it may, the reality for those of us who are paying close attention to what is happening within the Nigerian economy, it is very clear that a number of things are not just right. If ants have eaten the wood, regardless of whether the wood is still standing, by the time you say you want to apply some cosmetic, if you like, insecticide and all of that to protect the wood, it is too late. The foundation upon which the Nigerian economy is built clearly makes it very vulnerable to shocks, to recession. One of which is, of course, the fact that we are an economy based on allocation. So if for any reason something happens to oil, everybody goes into panic mode.
And that's exactly what Yari was saying.
The reality is that where we are now, we can't even say that we have come out of recession. And I'll tell you what I mean. If the price for a commodity was 20 naira as at the time we had this challenge of recession, and 10 people were working, now the price remains 20 naira, however 5 people are remaining in that establishment. The books will show you that, yes, we're buying our bread or whatever that commodity is for 20 naira, but the economy has suffered unemployment. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when there is a general upward movement in price, the books will show that, yes, the economy is earning, which is why the customs can come and say that, we have crossed the 1 trillion mark in earning. But in reality, when you do the conversion in relative terms, you say you want to compare with last year, you want to look at exchange rate, you want to look at even individual purchasing power, you discover that all of this translates to just figures, numericals. They don't really show the volume of activity in the economy, and that is the problem that we're facing under this APC government. It is full of deceit, it is full of mirror imaging, and indeed, Nigeria might actually still be in recession.
Oh, that is an interesting position to take at this time when we were celebrating it just a couple of months
No, the books
ago.
say that we have come out of it. Do you understand what I've just said?
On what basis
We have come out of it in terms of the books, but in practical terms, things are harder today. Let me tell you, I mentioned something about ants.
But is it not the practical term that is supposed to reflect in the books? Is it just reflecting, I mean, books saying one thing and reality is different?
You know, I found it very strange when we were told that we had gotten out of recession, because people had seen, Nigerians in general, things were actually getting harder for them. You know, recession is, okay, you've gotten out of that, your economy is no longer shrinking. But I know that, I don't know how they fixed up those figures or how they got those figures.
No,
but
there was reality. It helped.
The reality I saw in terms of Nigerians on the streets, Nigerians in their homes, things were not, they couldn't feel it. They didn't know how those figures came about. But then I agreed with them. I didn't argue with them that too. I see a situation where we are not getting any better. There is no strategy we've put in place. Look at the budget compared to the last budget. We are reducing the budget. Our health sector is in shambles. We're cutting down on that. Education, there's nothing, there's really no plan. So where exactly, how is the economy going to move? Look at our ports.
For a lot of Nigerians,
we can't move things out, we can't move
for a
things
lot of
in.
Nigerians, and that's why we're having this conversation, a lot of Nigerians will say this is a humongous amount. 20, what's it now? Over 20-something billion for senators to get.
Okay.
We'll probably get to that subsequently. But still on this issue of recession. LCCI said that even though the governor did not have figures, that Nigeria's economy is weak.
Yes.
And you talked about oil earlier, that if we go anything above, I mean, below $50 a barrel, we might have problems. Now, we had this man saying that we would like to avoid the risk of recession. And in order for us to do this, we need to address our physical viability, like the cost of governance, our huge debt profile, the amount we commit to fuel importation, and our low productivity. And this was echoed by the Registrar, Institute of Finance and Control of Nigeria. He said he concurs and says that except the federal government come up with innovative measures to stimulate aggregate demand, the economy might slip into another recession by next year. That's what he is saying. So,
no.
Do you agree, and what needs to be done? That would be my question to you.
To be honest, you know, when we say recession, it simply means that in terms of gross domestic product, there is a shrinking, there is some contraction, you know, of, if you like, all of the productive variables. Maybe before we used to get to our peak, let me say like 80. Let me just use a figure like 80. But now we're not measuring up to 80. We're now about 60. If this happens one quarter, followed by another quarter, in like say 6 months, the books will now say, you are now having challenges in terms of your, what is it called now? In terms of your economy, okay? However, what I said initially, I'm not shifting from that position, is that yes, the books must have reflected an improvement. Are you with me? However, the practical reality is that the hardship is getting choky. Why is it the way it is? It is the way it is because foundationally, we don't really have anything that can absorb the shocks. What has helped us to come out of recession, actually, will be that, yes, we got additional loans, and we also got bailout funds, of course, the Paris Club refund and all of that, which they shared, is still an allocation kind of arrangement. For us to get the economy on sound footing, we need to do some form of structural adjustment. We need to restructure the economy properly to have some recognition for elastic, if you like,
what would this
demand.
restructuring entail?
Yeah, now, if we say restructuring, some people have talked about increment in VAT. They've talked about internally generated revenue. They've talked about productive aspects like agriculture and all of that. All of this will help. However, the relationship between work done and income that you get, we need to address it. It is very, very important. Now, if, for instance, in Ghana, a man's salary is the equivalent of Nigeria, say 1,000 naira. However, from that 1,000 naira, he can take care of his rent, he can take care of his transportation, he can take care of his children going to school. Whereas his counterpart in Nigeria will still remain challenged with that same 1,000. It tells you that we need to do some adjustment, are you with me, in how we reward, you know, productivity. So that is where the challenge is. For us in Nigeria, we keep on banding figures all over the place. If I give you 1 trillion naira for a volume of transaction of say 20, and another person gives you 1 trillion naira for a volume of transaction of say 200, the figures are the same. However, one is much more healthy than the other. And that is the challenge that economists in Nigeria need to address.
All right, let's look at the issue of governors depending on federal allocation. This is one of the issues that the governor raised at the meeting, and saying that there is need for the incoming governors to move away from that mindset and find a way to grow their internally generated revenue so they can address these issues. Do you see that actually happening? Because most governments, it seems, depend basically on this federal allocation. And when people talk, they always refer, didn't you get federal allocation?
Yes, the thing is, first of all, Yari, who is saying this thing, I wonder how far he went in increasing his IGR and making sure his state was less dependent on federal allocation. I would like to see the effort he put in. And I think that's what he was trying to tell the governors, that basically we didn't do this for reasons, I don't know, but he was trying to tell them that coming in, you have to be very prepared. You have to, these are the kind of things you must do to ensure that you don't face the kind of challenges that we face. I think that was the general scope of his discussion. But then, what we've had right now is governors who just collect money and distribute money. They've not put, most of our governors have not done anything special. And I hope there are some of them coming in right now who have ideas on how they plan to act differently. Look at their local resources, look at their people, like Professor Shibajo was talking about human development. You know, let your people develop maybe software, maybe education, something they can export out of the country and earn something. Agriculture, there are a lot of crops you can now, but then we have the ports again that are choked up. You try to ship out something, it's stuck there for several months. But then IGR is very important. States now, and the labor, for instance, they are challenging the governors that if you are coming in as a governor, you can, because that's a fear. This minimum wage is one of the reasons people are very angry with this kind of discussion, because some governors may now go there and say, oh, sorry, we came and there was recession.
But I mean, you can't really fault them, because even before the arrangement and the agreement was signed, they were very vocal. They had several meetings. They said, we cannot pay this amount. And don't forget that some of those governors are outgoing governors. The ones that are coming in might not have the necessary
But you came in all the same, knowing full well that this thing has basically been agreed upon. You still went and you contested, knowing that these are the things you are going to face. You are going to have to pay that 30,000 naira. So it's no excuse.
Do you actually believe that, let's not be too optimistic and say 20 states will be able to pay that 30,000 naira minimum wage?
If the governors are actually going to work as real governors, I don't think anyone should be unable to pay. But if they want to come there
you
and
don't
just...
think, but in reality, the possibility is there that...
There is a possibility, of course. I am worried that, because Yari was one of those governors who basically, he just laid around. For now, his state is in shambles and is almost spending most of his time in Abuja. So if we have governors, like 10 governors like Yari coming in, then we are going to have these shortages. But if we have creative governors coming in who are going to try their best to do something different, then this will not be a challenge.
You mentioned Oshibanjo's advice, the vice president, to them to think of other areas of agriculture and technology. I want to take you up on that. Let me go to Martins on this one. During that same banquet for the newly elected governors, he's quoted as saying that governors should confront the situation individually, as there is no 100% guarantee that the federal government, already burdened by a deficit of about 2 trillion naira, could offer much hope. Now, do you think that this will be enough push for these, let's say, newbies?
Fundamentally, you cannot do much outside of the resources that are at your disposal. I said that the way the Nigerian economy is structured, it is a bedeviling agent. It makes it difficult, actually, for people to function optimally. When you say you want to have human capital development, how are you going to go about it? The initial resources that you're going to dole out, where are they going to come from? The reality on ground is that we need to fine-tune this whole arrangement about Nigeria. It is not compulsory, honestly speaking, it is not compulsory for us to have a uniform payment structure across Nigeria. That is one fundamental truth we need to accept. That way, it will be possible, for instance, for most states in northern Nigeria to pay less because their productivity is low. That is the reality of the matter. Part of the challenge we have in this country is that
you have a risk
just a minute.
Uproar if people don't get what others across the country
No, that is not how it works. Natural law, natural order recognizes differences. And if you walk outside of that principle, you're going to face a brick wall. You cannot have a uniform pay system across Nigeria. You must liberalize the way people earn their income because the challenges that they face. For instance, we cannot grow apples in Nigeria. That is the truth of the matter. It has nothing to injust. So
there's something I want to say about this.
I want to get somewhere, please. I don't want to miss my thoughts. Now, the reality is that you talk about something, for instance, Petroleum Equalization Fund. What it costs you to move petrol from the Lagos ports all the way to Maiduguri, for instance, it must reflect in the pricing. But you say no. Therefore, people begin to make claims. Some of those claims you cannot even defend if they are properly investigated. Now you see a government come in and they say, we are going to plug all the wastages. What wastages have they plugged? The wastages have now grown so big, nobody can control anything again. It is a big challenge. I rest my case.
Okay, let me say something about this petroleum equalizer. Let me use that analogy.
Yes.
If you say the minimum that we are going to sell petrol is 145 naira, then you provide this fund and people take petrol to Borno and they are able to sell maybe 160 because of cost of transportation. It's similar to when you say the minimum wage is going to be 30,000 naira.
Yes.
There is no law saying that Lagos State cannot pay 45,000. There is no law saying or your state should not pay. You understand? Rivers, Delta, they can't pay 35.50. But what we are saying is that the basic minimum that anybody should be earning is that 30,000 naira. So that's...
Can I just say something?
Okay.
House rent in Lagos, for instance, minimum wage is 30,000. House rent in Lagos, a decent accommodation, maybe per annum you're looking at 100,000. I'm just talking about one room, maybe 100,000. In a place like Kano, 30,000 minimum wage. House rent could be maybe 12,000 per annum. You see the difference? Now, the person in Lagos is actually poorer with 30,000, unlike the person in Maiduguri. Do you understand?
Yes.
Now, the reality is that all the economic parameters, they work with demand and supply mechanism. And once you alter that process, you're going to have a problem. Unless you're running a socialist economy, of which we know that all of the governments that came on the premise of socialism, they've all died. The last I want to believe was Cuba, telling us that if we go through free enterprise, we must allow the forces of demand and supply determine how we get our economic reward. Are we together? To that extent, unless we restructure our economy, for instance, the federal government has carried too much burden on its shoulders. Right now, the federal government is doing bailout. If you are doing bailout, why not shed some of these monies to the states, for instance, since you're operating on the basis of allocation? That is a fundamental problem that needs to be addressed. And if you don't address it, you continue to have this type of economics of prostitution, because that's what it is.
Okay. Let me add something to the Lagosian.
Yes.
The Lagosian in Lagos paying 100,000 naira rent. Let me just say that they can clamor to get paid 45,000 or 60,000 as the minimum wage in Lagos. You know, while the person in Kano may be earning 30,000 or 35,000.
But this is Nigeria we live in,
yes,
and you know that if you bring up such scenario, somebody
yes,
will
his
come
argument
with a
is
clever
sound.
argument.
No, what I'm
yes,
saying
but
is
somebody will come up with an argument and say,
wage, see, the minimum wage does not imply that everybody must
That's just
earn.
we get that much.
That
We get that much. But
exactly.
considering the Nigerian factor,
You see,
if you say that, okay, the person in Maiduguri should take less because of the cost of living, and the person here, you do know that there will be agitation. What about federal character? What about uniformity in the distribution of resources? They will tell you that, okay, if that is the case, somebody will go and ignite the hike in prices of commodities, and then they will tell you, okay, now we are equal. Why won't I have this? Those are some of the complications.
That is why they are all on 30,000 naira right now.
Just a minute. Just a minute. I think let us understand where we are coming from, where we sit on this particular argument now.
Yeah.
Now, the issue is this: was there any need to tilt the minimum wage from where it was before to where it is now? My answer is perhaps. It's not a straight yes.
Okay.
Reason being that all the economic variables are in shock mode. Whatever you do now is actually going to compound the problem. It is not likely to give any ease. In a few weeks, in a few months, let me tell you, we're in Lagos here now.
Just before, because I'm just being told now that we have just about a minute, you talked about the economic structure that we are currently operating, and there is need for it to change. I want to quickly ask you, what kind of structure should we be considering as a nation if we really want to move forward?
Free market economy. What it simply means is allow demand and supply to flourish. What we're doing now is allocation of resources. It's a problem. It's a burden. And a lot of people eventually bleed the system because they make claims that they can't even justify. Which is why a state like Bayelsa has 8 local governments, but Kano has 44. For instance, it is not a realistic structure. It is not.
Quick thought before we move on.
Well, for me, I think partly we should listen to some of what Yari has said. I think there's logic there, and he's speaking from information that he got some months ago with that meeting with the president. So let everybody strive to make sure they increase their IGR, and let the people keep the governors on their toes. They can actually perform if we keep them on their toes. But when we just lay back, then they'll tell us they can't do anything.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. We appreciate it. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at 23.7 billion naira as gratuity for Nigerian senators. To stay with us.